My name's THANGAM DEBBONAIRE. I'm the Member of Parliament for Bristol West, and that includes the city centre. And I'm here today to say I support the nil cap on licences for so-called sexual entertainment venues, or strip clubs as they're often called. These venues only exist if we accept that misogynistic, sexist attitudes about men's right to pay for access to women's bodies are acceptable. And these strip clubs give that clear signal. And I'm afraid to say that research has shown us that that sort of mindset, those sorts of values, lead to a culture of sexism which underpins men's abuse and violence towards women and girls. So we have to ask ourselves, what sort of place do we want Bristol to be? Do we want Bristol to be a place where men and women feel equally safe to go out and use public space, but also do we want it to be the sort of place that challenges sexist attitudes or one that supports them? Bristol's a progressive city with fantastic, creative, lively, wonderful things to do and a night out in Bristol. And I think a night out in Bristol city centre does not need to end in so-called entertainment which sustains misogynistic, sexist behaviour. I support the nil cap. I support it because I want to end male violence against women and girls. And I support it because I think that in the 21st century, this sort of sexism has no place in our great city. Thank you. Please support the nil cap and take part in the consultation before it ends.
I'm Dr. AKIMA Thomas, the Clinical Director of Women and Girls Network, which is a resource working in London with survivors of all forms of violence against women and girls. Yes, I'm absolutely 100% backing the non-licensing of strip clubs in Bristol. It's really important that we send out a clear message about, one, the harm, the potential harm. We talk about safety, but safety is about disrupting elements of harm. So we know that women are not going to feel safe on the streets in those environments. We know that it sends a clear message of entitlement, of a lack of sanctions, of the subjugation of women. And that's really important about the message that we give to the younger generation and also to men and boys in terms of it's not okay to treat women as less than. It's not okay to exploit. There's a social justice agenda here. So if we understand that absolutely the deaths that that's happened this year of all of those women who have been killed by their partners, of all of those unnecessary deaths of police taking pictures of Bieber and her sister Nicole, if we're outraged by what happened to Sarah and Sabina on the streets, then we need to make sure that we make those streets as safe as possible. There's something about the continuum of violence. So if you consent to one part of it, you consent to it all. And I work with the other side. I work with survivors of the sex industry who talk about their pain. They talk about the lack of boundaries, the lack of safety, the lack of concern, the dehumanising of those experiences. They would talk about the intrusion, the glare, the staring, the objectification, where they felt less than human. That would take its toll. That would create injuries that bruise the soul. That's really powerful for survivors to be able to recover and to come back from that. I'm not pathologising what happens. I'm just saying that absolutely, if we give consent to one form of violence, then we give consent to it all. And I think it's really important that we don't criminalise, those who are being sexually exploited. So I'm really clear that that's not what this is about. It's sending out another very powerful message about our lack of tolerance for violence against women and girls. There's something about a moral imperative that's calling us to say no. We say no in many different ways. I hope that it gets heard. I hope that there's going to be a zero tolerance. And let's not just hope, let's plan, let's have an intention, a dedication, a commitment to stop violence against women and girls in all of its manifestations, in all of its forms. Okay.
I'm Marianne Hester, and I'm Professor at the University of Bristol, where I head the Centre for Gender and Violence Research. And I feel very strongly that on the basis of all the evidence I've seen and the research we've done over many years, that we must have a nil cap on sexual entertainment venues in Bristol as well as elsewhere. Sexual entertainment venues create a situation that objectify women in particular. And we know that such objectification, gendered inequality creates situations where violence against women is much more likely to occur, and also that sexual violence against women increases further inequalities between men and women as well. So in order to have a more equal society and a more civilized society, we have to put a nil cap on sexual entertainment venues.
My name is Jean Fader. I'm a GP in Bristol and a researcher in Bristol Medical School. I lead a domestic and sexual violence and health research group here, and I am firmly opposed to the granting of any licenses for sexual entertainment in any city, including Bristol. My main reason for this is that I think there's evidence that strip clubs, sexual entertainment venues, do affect men's attitudes towards women and towards sex, and not in a good way. That sense of entitlement and power which comes from watching sexual entertainment runs against our attempts to change behavior, to reduce sexual and domestic violence. And I really can't see how any council can countenance and agree to the licensing in the future of sexual entertainment venues. So I would really support the call to end strip club licensing in Bristol.
My name is Helen Mott. I'm a gender equality consultant and a specialist in policy and practice for the prevention of violence and abuse against women and girls. I co-wrote the guidance for Public Health England on approaches to prevention in higher education settings, and I also work with national and international stakeholders in government, criminal justice, education, employment, and community engagement to help build cultures that send clear messages that support equality between men and women, boys and girls, and that reject the harmful attitudes that underpin sexual and gender-based violence. I'm also a proud Bristolian, born and bred. I fully support and applaud Bristol's proposed move to a policy that will not license sexual entertainment venues. Any city that values equality and is serious about ending violence against women and girls needs to take this approach.
Hi, my name is Katie Taylor. I'm the Director of Bristol Women's Voice and an independent consultant in the male violence against women and girls sector. I'm strongly in support of a nil cap for sexual entertainment venues in Bristol because violence against women and girls is endemic across our society, and we know the most effective way to challenge this is to challenge it at the community level, to challenge the sexist ideology that sits behind acts of misogyny, and to do that we need to change culture, male entitlement, we need to change laws, we need to change the way in which we treat women and girls and the sexual objectification that women and girls come under, and strip clubs are part of this. Selling women's bodies on the high street is not okay, it's part of the problem and will never be part of the solution.
I'm Penny Gane, Chair of Bristol Women's Commission. I support the Licensing Committee's proposal of a nil cap for sexual entertainment venues, or SEVs. SEVs exploit women for men's sexual gratification and profit from it. The objectification of women becomes normalised and has a negative impact on all women. If men believe they're entitled to pay for access to women's bodies in SEVs, that entitlement persists in other areas of their lives to the detriment of women who are facing an onslaught of violence against women and girls. These clubs are a relic of the past and have no place in a fair and equal future.
My name is Dr. JACCI STOYLE, and I have campaigned against the sex trade for 17 years. I was the chair of Paisley Amnesty Group for 9 years, and I'm the secretariat for the cross-party group for commercial sexual exploitation in the Scottish Parliament. I studied the sociology of sexuality in the course of my PhD, and I subsequently taught for many years in a women's prison. From both my academic and practical experience, it is clear strip clubs harm the women who perform in them mentally, physically, and emotionally. Firstly, research has shown that the number of women in the strip industry who have experienced prior abuse, including childhood sexual abuse, or who are still experiencing abuse, such as domestic violence, is disproportionately high. Evidence from research in the Home Office indicates that lap dancing is a key entry point into prostitution. Secondly, there have been many studies undertaken on the harm of objectification, and I'll refer you to a summary of these harms in an article by Caroline Heldman, PhD, in Sociological Images. Women who grow up in a culture with widespread sexual objectification tend to view themselves as objects of desire for others. This internalized sexual objectification has been linked to problems with mental health, for example, depression, eating disorders, body shame, and poor self-worth, which is shared across all ethnicities. Critically, these internal effects are compounded by the fact that sexually objectified women are dehumanized by others and seen as less competent and worthy of empathy by both men and women. Effectively, their low self-worth is reflected back at them in a vicious circle of mental and emotional undoing. Furthermore, exposure to images of sexually objectified women cause male viewers to be more tolerant of sexual harassment and rape myths. The sex trade thrives on male entitlement to sexual services, money, and power. It feeds on the multiple inequalities and poverty of women and girls. That is why you need to stop enabling this in your town centre and support all women out, practically and emotionally, into safe alternative work.